Welcome back, Inebri-ites. This is Andy, the Inebri-art podcast. I am still recording from home due to situations. We're starting to do some live recordings here and there, but it actually has allowed us to reach out to people that we wouldn't normally get to speak to. And today we're talking to William Poyer, who's over in London. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you are a musician, obviously. Well, not obviously, because we talked to a lot of different people. But what's your style? How'd you get into music? Kind of give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up playing music, playing in punk rock bands in South Wales. I'm Welsh. Grew up in South Wales, playing in punk rock bands, and but always really just loved melody, whether it was in rock and roll or in grunge or in punk rock, and sort of gravitated towards acoustic guitars throughout my teens and early 20s. And I think going to university and only having an acoustic guitar made me develop that technique of playing that instrument, and then later, sort of started to really fall in love with a lot of American folk music, really. And that's where my sort of own interpretation of Americana, folk, rock and roll has come from.
But you got started in punk, which seems to be, I don't want to say standard, but really popular over there. What is about, London and UK and Wales that people gravitate towards punk? I mean, we have punk here, but not like over there. It seems like there's a ton of it.
Right. It's hard to tell. I mean, sort of a generation's behind me, it would have been the political movements of the 70s and the 80s, and essentially it would have been the sort of Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, closing of the unions, factories, work leaving, the working class man losing his opportunity to provide for his family. Whilst I was still attached to some of those ideals, I was also massively influenced by the punk rock that came from the States. So the likes of Pennywise and Bad Religion, the early Offspring stuff, that's what I was really digging, and really melodic as well. So as to why, I think the UK's probably always had a great affiliation with just producing such great punk rock bands. I think it's hard to not love the Pistols and the Clash and so many other wonderful bands. So yeah, I think we're all for it, man.
Do you think there's any connection between that kind of speaking out against the system of punk rock that carried over into folk music? Because I kind of feel there's a lot of folk music, Bob Dylan especially, that kind of bucked the system and was very political. So is that,
totally,
did that have part of the appeal to you?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I mean, that's an interesting question, and one that I've not thought about. I mean, when I was playing punk rock, I wasn't necessarily always the lyricist, but I was always singing and writing, and I tend to write fairly subconsciously. So I wouldn't say that was an obvious attraction, but there's certain parallels between folk and punk rock, and I think a lot of people are doing it so well these days. I listen to Shovels and Rope. I think they're from North Carolina. They got such a punky sound, and Shaky Graves, and over here we've got Billy Bragg, and there's just so many artists, and Frank Turner, and these people that do folk punk so well.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I just recently got turned on to a band called Days and Days, like Days and Daze,
okay.
And I never even knew like folk punk was a thing. And it's kind of
it's a big thing.
It's kind of like we're like they have a washtub bass player in the band. It's just really interesting how they kind of
that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
But they have still like punk persona that you would expect from Johnny Rotten.
I mean, I was living in exactly, totally. I lived in Mexico for 3 years, and I sort of needed to leave the UK. Went and I was living there. Not for any other reason than just needing to be inspired, but I've became really good friends with a bunch of like bluegrass, sort of 50s swing folk punk rockers, and They found their own sort of mixture that worked really well for them. I think probably it's, there's a little bit of punk in everything. As soon as you put a bit of bite into what you're doing, then you could consider that to have a bit of punk about it, or whether it's due to the content. I don't know. So I think it's, like many genres, there's where all those little rivers are kind of linked somehow.
Why did you go to was it of course it was intentional to go to Mexico. It's not like you were going to Canada and got lost, but
no.
Why did you go to Mexico, and is there a Mexican influence in your music?
Yeah, so Mexico was it was a funny one. I think so my journey with music was always that I loved it and never really sort of said let's do this. So I had grown up with my mum and dad. My dad was an old surfer back in Wales, and they, during my teens, had a surf shop. And a hippie, I think when I was about 13, 14 years old, some hippie dude walked in and was like, "Hey guys, I've just got back from Mexico. It was like Spain 100 years ago. You got to go. It's unreal." And my dad, when I was 14 years old, he spent all his cash and took us out there, and we had a whale of a time and fell in love with Mexico. So I'd always had this affinity with the country. And as I sort of progressed through my teens and into my early 20s and got a job and thought maybe this is what I should be doing, having a real job, I just got massively disillusioned with it all. And the first place that came to mind when I thought about packing it all in was Mexico. So that's what I did. I just bought myself a one-way ticket on a credit card. I had no cash. I just flew out to Mexico with no Spanish and no friends and no money, and just figured it out whilst I got there. I had my guitar, which is pretty much all I needed, and made it work from then on out. And so, yeah, I stayed there for 3 years then, just writing and really just working on what was going to become my first record.
That's awesome. That's such like a rock and roll story. I got on a plane with just my guitar and didn't know the language. And so you said your parents owned a surf shop?
Yeah, my mum and dad.
Is surfing a thing in Wales? I would never.
Man, I know. Believe it or not. I mean, the quality of the waves are not great, but they're consistent. They're consistently average, and we make a go of it. It's cold.
Consistently average was my nickname in high school.
Dude, yeah, that's what my wife calls me.
Do you think
believe it or not?
Do you think that kind of surf mentality had like an influence into kind of, you getting into music? And because I mean, surfers kind of have their own,
100%.
Their own way.
Yeah, we would always as teenagers be around someone's house watching a skate movie or a surf movie, and it would be, whether it be Pennywise or Silverchair or the Chili Peppers or some obscure surf rock band from Australia. There'd always be really cool tunes, and as soon as somebody could drive, you'd be in a car, and it would the surfing or the skating would revolve around listening to music before and afterwards, and guitars would always be out. So whether you had a fire on the beach afterwards or you ended up having a barbecue, I listen back to it now. It sounds rose-tinted glasses, it sounds pretty, ideal. But it was fun, it's a cool question, because it made me think about how much music actually we were surrounded by without realizing, and maybe not all of it was what you wanted to listen to, but there's a lot of cool music, and I suppose those pastimes really are heavily influenced by music, even though the activity is a sport essentially.
It's so funny. You were just talking about back in the day, and it kind of made me reminisce a little bit. And I was thinking, at the time, you're not kind of appreciating sitting there with your friends and hang out. You're like, we want to do this, or we want to do that. And now you're like, oh my God, sitting around a fire playing guitars. That sounds amazing.
I know. Tell me about it. I know. I've got a 1-year-old son now who really dictates what happens. Now that I think back and I think about hanging out with my buddies, playing around a fireplace, I'm like, well, yeah, that was a long time ago.
Congratulations on the son. Has that started to influence your writing? I remember this is a super long time ago, but when my son was born, it really affected me in ways that I never expected to. I'd start to tear up at
crazy,
movies and like weird shit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, having a son's absolutely influenced my writing. It's really interesting. That I hadn't thought about it until, I mean, I guess maybe when he was on his way. The minute he was born, it influenced it massively, and I found that my vocabulary seems to times tenfold almost. Just the word son suddenly had two meanings. It was, the sun in the sky, and also having a son. So there's a play on words immediately there that came into play. And I was working on a song just the other day, and it came to play with how you see the world and how they're going to influence the world or be influenced by your thinking. And there's a line in a song that I wrote, and it says, "We're ordinary men, son," and it's a song about getting overly excited and maybe becoming overly confident in the wrong kinds of way at times. Maybe if you've had a couple too many beers and you get a bit too confident in yourself. And this song is very much about controlling your emotions. And that line that came in, trying to teach him almost and how to best be himself. Like that line, "We're ordinary men, son," really stuck with me and made its way into a song. And there's many other songs I'm working on that pay reference to trying to teach somebody to not make the same mistakes that you've made. It's been a real eye opener having a kid and how that has slowly infiltrated its way into my song.
It's, as you're talking, I was just thinking, it's like, I feel like having a son really brought into light how little I know.
100%.
Because you're like supposed to be teaching this person, especially like when they get to that age where they're like, why? And you're like, yeah, I don't know, man. The TV just works. I don't know why. It just does.
So we're not there yet, but the questioning will come on shortly, and I'm sure that's going to be that'll be really interesting. I think just that the way that you think about your own father comes into play as well, right? So it becomes like a 3-generational topic, because you think about how about your own son, but then it makes you think about your father as well, and about that relationship. Open up your vocabulary. In my context, the songwriting, and it does it so for the way that I think about my son and how I want him to see the world, or how I see the world for him, and also then from another perspective with regards to, it makes me think differently about my father and about what he's done for us and why he tried certain things. And it's been a real eye opener for sure.
Yeah, and it gives you that, it makes you suddenly more forgiving of your parents, I think, because you're like, yeah, man, they didn't know either, and they're just kind of figuring it out as they went. But it's a great experience, and I love, because people are always like, oh, 2 is a great age, or 6 is a great age, or whatever. I have really enjoyed my kids at every age for completely different reasons. And my daughter and I have just started working on art projects together. And so it's really exciting for me because, she's great. Into it, and I'm talking to her now as an artist and not as a child. So, and she's got great ideas. Cool. Do you hope that your son follows in your footsteps and gets into music?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I do, and I mean, do you know what? I'm saying to an extent, I do. I absolutely do. I would love for us to be able to share that. I think when you see, whether it be fishing or cooking or baking, I think any parent being able to share a pastime with their child is a wonderful thing, because you're going to get that quality time with them. I'm very positive because Vincent, that's my son's name, he really loves music, and he loves it when I play it. At the moment, he's not a fan of the harmonica, so for some reason he's not enjoying the sound of a harmonica. So the songs that I have with the harmonica aren't getting played at his house these days. But he really digs music, and he it's funny. We went to a friend's birthday party, which was in a park, and they had a speaker the other day, and it was so cool. He puts on his bass face, he crunches his eyes and his nose and his mouth, and he really sort of like nods his head to the groove. Friends of mine have noticed from videos that I've sent to them that they, other musicians have said, God, he's got great time and he's already in time. He bounces to the beat of a song. He's only 1 year old, but he does that and he sings along. He starts screaming when I'm singing, and there's certain songs that he really likes. He really likes the stuff that's got a strong rhythm to it. So I'm quietly confident that he's going to be a player, and that'll be something that we can enjoy. If I could leave enough instruments around the house, hopefully he'll just pick them up without any pressure. And who knows? Maybe one day he'll learn to play the drums or the bass or the guitar, and he could be in the band. And I'll save some money on some of the musicians that play with me.
Yeah, there you go. Up until I'd say I don't know, mid-teens, and then what do you mean you're not paying me?
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
I think that's awesome, and having kids is such a weird influence on every part of your life that it obviously will affect your art or your music in any way. So you have some release coming up soon, right?
Yeah, so we've just released a new single called "Sign It From Me." Mm-hmm. So I released an album in 2016, and then post that had been racking up a bunch of songs. And I've done a few different recordings, and I think over time, and the more time you spend in the studios, you become a little bit more precious about things. And I've been playing on a lot of music, and so I spent a lot of time in studios and recording stuff and things that didn't get released for whatever reasons.
What do you mean by more precious about things?
Well, I suppose I was becoming a better player, and I was becoming I was learning to understand the transition from writing and playing to then how that then goes down on record. And I think they're very different mediums, and it took me a while to understand that maybe a song that you write and that works live doesn't transcend in exactly the same way when you put it on tape.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So from a production perspective, I think I had a lot to learn, and maybe wasn't always able to articulate that in the studio. So there was a couple of recording sessions that never saw the light of day. And that was not due to anyone's fault, just maybe lack of communication or just lack of practice, or just, I was learning how I wanted things to sound. So for probably the best part of a couple of years, we didn't release any more material past the first album, which is called Born Lucky, which is available on all streaming platforms and everywhere. But then, last year we managed to start getting some tunes out, so we just started putting them out one by one to make things easier, and released three singles last year, and managed to then get back into releasing music this year, and taken a slightly different tact recently, and gone in the studio with the band live, and trying to get a bit more of take some of the maybe try and think a bit less about what I was worrying about previously, and just go in with the band where we've got the sound and we know what we're looking for. And what we've been doing recently actually is just going in and recording everything live. So just turning everything on and just going boom. And that's been really, really fun. And it's been great to bring other players into that and share that with them. And it seems to be doing good things, and people have been really appreciating and enjoying this kind of authentic feel, and just trying to capture what we do live, really. We released "Sign It From Me" just a few weeks ago, so that's out and available now, and we're ready with the next single as well. Just finishing off the music video, and the next single will be called "Round the Bend," and that will be coming out in the next 6 to 8 weeks. But right now we've just released "Sign It From Me," which is available as well on all streaming platforms. So
I was reading an article the other day, and I'm not going to remember his name because I'm really shit with names, but the CEO of, I think it was Spotify,
It was. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I was talking about how bands can't wait 3-4 years to release a whole album. That their release schedule has to be different. Do you see that being a trend now? That like, oh, we're going to release one song now, and in like 6 weeks release another song, and kind of instead of doing an album, do like singles released over a long course of time?
I think, yeah. I mean, the way it's a combination of a bunch of. It's a combination of a load of different things, or sort of pointing towards one direction, really, and that be, I think, partially due to the streaming platform and people not necessarily listening to albums, but listening to playlists. Mm-hmm. It could attention spans, but it can also be, I think from an artistic perspective, it's maybe not as much fun to not do an album. Albums are really great fun to do, and from a creative point, you can really think of themes, but at the same time, I think each to their own. I think if you're a home producer, then and you've got that skill set, you can do an album. But I understand why the businessmen say that singles these days for an act that hasn't yet quite broken through are the way forward, because it gives you an opportunity to build a press release on each track. Mm-hmm. But you're always going to have that split of opinion where, and I don't know where I stand on it. I think I'd love to get in the studio and record an album, but I also understand that it's necessary to put enough focus on a track to try and get some traction, which will probably do your career some benefit. But what I don't appreciate, I suppose, like most people, is when the CEO of a company like Spotify, which essentially is Napster, turns around and tells you, you should be doing it one way or the other, when they should probably be distributing the royalties slightly differently too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's one of those things where change is inevitable, and it tends to make life easier if you can embrace the change. But sometimes it's just like, I'm an artist, so I miss album art. And
me too.
Really, I remember like one of my favorite albums as a kid was Jethro Tull's "Thick as a Brick," because the album was a newspaper.
Yeah.
They were just really inventive, cool ways to package the product, which, if you didn't...
It was the best thing, right? You'd go, your friends would go out on a weekend, and you'd have your pocket money, you'd go and choose records, and one of you would buy a Less Than Jake record, and the other person would buy like a Ryan Adams record, and mm-hmm. you'd go back and you'd lend them to each other and stick them on your computer. It was a beautiful time.
William, in my day, we didn't stick them on our computer. We had to use a deck tape recorder to like record the album onto tape. Thanks for pointing that out. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I got into Iron Maiden as a kid because Eddie is badass. It had nothing at the time. It had nothing to do with the music, and then I bought the album because it looked cool, and then I listened to it. I'm like, oh, it's actually really good, and so like that kind of thing is missing from today's.
It is missing, and it's a shame. I've got buddies of mine. So I play in London in this amazing collective. So there's a truly unique bar that I've never experienced in Wales or Mexico or any of the cities that I've lived and worked in. And it's a real hub for amazing musicians. And there's been some pretty incredible graduates, I'd say, that have moved on to do some awesome things from that bar, and it's a real hub of talent and creativity. It's called Spiritual Bar. Spiritual Records is the label who I'm signed with, and those the guys that have progressed on to do good things, they've seemed to have found a balance where they've put out some singles, and then they put out an EP, and maybe then another couple of singles, and worked their way up to put an album out. It certainly is still the thing that you want to do. Mm-hmm. I think it's just finding the roads to get you to do that in a viable option, right, where you don't break the bank, or if labels, the budgets are different these days as well. So everyone's just trying to Also, maybe we're a little bit more focused on staying current. So perhaps in reference to that gentleman from Spotify and what he was saying about you can't put an album out every 4 years, but maybe you can put out 3 singles a year and it actually equates to the same amount of material going out.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something in that too. Whereas, the amount of material you put out might be similar, but you're just putting it out a bit more steadily to keep a growing fan base interested and to keep ticket sales going, so you can keep going on those tours, etc.
Well, the interesting thing now too is where everyone has a recording studio on their laptop, and I can get a nice quality microphone like I have here for cheap money. It's you can do so. You say you put out your album for the rest of the year, then you can be like, oh well, I recorded this live song, or I got together with a couple of buddies and did that other song in a different way. And I know a lot of people have been doing it through lockdown and stuff.
And you can release that stuff as well, right? And a lot of the songs that, a lot of the stuff that I save to my personal playlist will be, a version of a song that I actually prefer. And it was something that was, recorded live in some place. It's interesting how that's actually affected like the music video. And if you think back to, 10, 15 years ago, the music video was everything. Whereas now it seems to be that the live video, like a really well recorded studio live track, is almost a more valuable thing to release, because I think viewers and listeners are more interested in seeing something real. It's quite easy to plug in the auto-tune and make something sound great. Whereas I think if you're going to sell tickets for tours and people are going to really dig you as an artist, they want to see what you sound like live, whether that's actually in your local venue in your local city or whether that's via YouTube. So we've actually changed tack a lot recently, and the plan for releasing a lot of video footage for the next few singles is going to be doing that, as opposed to doing music videos, which I've done a bunch of, and we shot some really awesome music videos out in Mexico whilst I was there, and I go back regularly and we do the same thing. But really, at the moment, we're looking at doing more live videos where you go into a cool environment and you take some nice microphones and you mix it and you release it, and people seem to react really well to having live visuals with a cool recording.
Yeah, and sometimes everybody wants that viral video, but just sometimes it's something about that kind of stripped down, just you. Is so authentic. I know a friend of mine, maybe 2 years ago, his name's Dylan, and he did a cover of Dexy's Midnight Runner, Come On Eileen, but he did it like really melancholy, and it was like it became like this really sad sounding song, and it was just him, a camera, a light, a microphone, nothing flashy about it. And he just put it up online, and Dexy's Midnight Runner ended up reposting it, and it kind of, went a little viral just off of something. He's like, it's kind of. I mean, that's so playing around. It's so interesting.
It's so interesting because a friend of mine, a guy that worked a lot with Spiritual Records here in London. It's a place in Camden, and his name's Jack Broadbent, and he was essentially discovered playing on a bridge in Amsterdam doing a cover of. On the road, and it's a slide guitar version, and that's what broke him. And now he's playing like Montreal Jazz Festival and all these places awesome. literally off the back of doing that. And there's numerous covers. There's another friend of mine has done a beautiful melancholy version of Bruce Springsteen's "Danced in the Dark." That again, as you say, online has just sort of found a life of its own. So there's and whether that's just purely organic because someone has done it and just put it out there, or whether it's slightly strategic in promoting themselves as an artist and using a cover as a way to do that. Some people, I'm sure, are doing that as well. Either or, man, it's something that's certainly another aspect of change in music and change of the times that. That's cool, man. I love seeing people reinvent old songs. Essentially, that's what folk music is. Whether it's Woody Guthrie and Bruce Springsteen. It's
we're consistently rejigging old songs.
It kind of reminds me of that old Hollywood trope of like the 1930s, 40s, where they're like, oh, they discovered that actress in a diner when she was waiting tables, where you can be out in the street
cool.
playing guitar and someone uses their phone and puts it up online, and next thing you could be playing in Montreal. Camden's awesome. I love Camden.
Camden's great.
Oh,
Camden's so cool.
I was only in London for a brief time, and I made sure I hit Camden, and it was such a good time.
Yeah, it's great. This place that I play is just off the main street, and it looks like a dive bar, but you go in and it's this like 100 capacity venue with the most amazing backlog of phenomenal artists that have gone on to do beautiful things. And the owner is Spiritual Records. He's a true sort of artist at heart, and really doesn't put his business hat on too often, and really just focuses on putting in good players. And as a result, the place is just busy 7 nights a week, and it's a real pleasure to play there. And I think it epitomizes Camden and the London music scene for what it was. It's all the stuff that people, when you think back to the golden era, it's a place like this makes you think that there's still some great stuff happening.
Well, it's always like there'll be some, like, back when I was in high school in the 90s, like Seattle, everybody wanted to go to Seattle.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm sure there's something going on there, but it seems like there'll be a flare up of movement coming out of somewhere that will become big.
Sure.
But certain places always stay like a hotbed. Boston, I'm not throwing shade on Boston for music wise, but it's a hotbed for comedy. For some reason, comics come out of Boston. What is it about London that do you think always seems to have music coming out of London?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it's a crazy city. So when we moved back from Mexico City, I lived in Guadalajara for a year in Mexico, and then we moved to Mexico City. And in Mexico City, I found an amazing group of musicians. So in Mexico City, we'd been there a little while. I'd actually, by that point, crowdfunded my first record. And I crowdfunded my first record, saying, $5, you can get the record. We did it in dollars because it was money coming from Mexico, the States, the UK. And the biggest value that you could so it was a $500 ticket, and I'd get your name tattooed on me, which I did. We managed to raise $4,000 to make the first record. So that was great. Mexico City was unreal, and there was some amazing talents. And my best friends that are still out there, they're Mexican, and there's a guy from New Orleans, there's a guy from Oklahoma, there's a guy from Canada who plays amazing banjo, and I was from Wales. There's another English guy from Reading who played just the most beautiful finger-picking, melancholy kind of ballads. And there was just this amazing array of artists that we all found ourselves in this really unique spot, and we were hanging out all the time and sharing stories and songs, and it was a real dream. And for about a year and a half, I don't think it could have got any better. And then I had the money to make the record, and I wanted to come back and find a label to release it with in the UK. So at that point, I really didn't think I was devastated to leave Mexico. I didn't think I was going to find a better community to be working in and a better talent to be around, really, to inspire me. But I came back to London and played a bunch of places, and then eventually got recommended to go to this place, Spiritual Bar in Camden. I went there, and from the moment I walked into the door and looked on the stage and saw some dude, playing and singing on his own, and just dominating a room of 100 people and really holding them in the palm of their hand, I was like, wow, this is where I need to be. And it's a good question as to why that city, has just that level of talent and creativity. And I think it probably pushes you, it spurs you on. So I always find that I played better if the person before me was good. And I think the more you're around accomplished musicians and artists, it's just going to make you better, whether you're thinking of your technical playing or your lyrics or the structure of your songs or your stage presence, or even just structuring your set list. The better artists you're around, surely that's going to make you better. So that's going to have something to do with it. I think the fact that it's a melting pot of societies, that it's really open to immigration, I think is a big thing. I play with a bunch of Italian people that are just wonderful players, and of course there's Americans over here. There's people from Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. So I think that the cultural mix will have a really big impact as well, because you're exposed to lots of different personalities and nationalities and musical techniques as a result as well. And then the history is inevitably going to have something to do, right? It's going to say something too. And I think the history is probably what draws the amount of acts. And then as a result, when there's a lot of people, maybe some people would say it's saturated, but I think, the cream usually floats to the top, right? So I think if you work hard enough for long enough, and you're good enough, then that'll show. And in a city like London, that can be hard, because there's a lot of people out there playing, and it can be tricky because maybe it is saturated. But at the same time, there's some real quality here, and it's a pleasure to play with a lot of the people that I do play with. And yeah, it never ceases to amaze me how many wonderful musicians are around me that I get to play with. And maybe sometimes the venues are only 50, 100, 150 capacity, but everyone seems to be having a great time, and the music's great. And some of my pals over the last few years have gone on to do really, really, really special things. And, it's great to see that, and hopefully we'll be on that train.
I think one of the most important things that anyone could say, you just said, was if you want to get better, you hang out with people who are better than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't get better by hanging around people that don't know what they're doing, or you need someone who's going to push you and that you can learn from. And I think that's, no matter what it is that you're doing, that's the best advice that anyone can give.
100%. I've always said, to just be productive. I think everybody knows a genius who stays in their bedroom. We've all got those pals that are just the best songwriter you've ever met, or the best coder, or the best poet, or the best artist. But for whatever reason, they are comfortable in their environment, and they don't want to put themselves out there. And that's the difference between the people that really I've seen that have managed to move on to do great things, and a lot of them through Spiritual Records and the Spiritual Bar live venue in London, is because they've had that ability to really face it head on, and get out there in front of people, make mistakes, and it's okay. You got to be brave. You've got to be brave, and I think that's the difference between the guys that kind of manage to make a living from it, and the ones that don't, is that they've taken that leap of faith, and they've worked really hard as well.
So I want to ask you about London. We've been recording since March, mostly remotely because of COVID, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring up COVID in every episode. What's the situation over there now? Are you guys playing out again, or?
No, I've got a mask in my pocket, so I've been out just seeing some friends today. But yeah, it's the city's pretty much still in lockdown. I mean, music certainly is. So at the moment, pubs and restaurants have opened with social distancing rules, but there's grumblings all the time that they could close really at any moment if the number gets a little bit higher.
That's what our governor said yesterday, that we may be stepping back, but.
Yeah. I think also because of the time of the year, in September, our school term starts, and I think they're anticipating that the corona numbers are going to go up once school term starts again. So as a result, they might close restaurants and bars again. Fortunately, we've had some really good support from the government thus far, and only a couple of weeks ago, the Music Venue Trust, who represent all independent music venues here in the UK, managed to get a really big fund from the government to try and support these venues.
Oh, that's awesome.
They did put out, they said you can open, but under social distancing rules. But unfortunately, for pretty much every venue, they'd be at a loss, because you'd be operating up to 20% capacity, and to open the doors and turn on the lights, and staff and stock, etc., it just wouldn't be worthwhile. So a lot of venues are probably going to ride the year out by the looks of it. So there are no gigs really. Online gigs are kind of happening, but they seem to have that was okay for a while, but people aren't as interested as they were. I did a really cool stream, an HD stream from a venue just last weekend, and that was good fun, and that felt like a gig. And that was, with like audio from the desk and HD cameras, and they were editing on the spot. But again, it's not the same. So yeah, unfortunately, apart from a couple of pals who are playing in kind of wide open spaces with separated tables, I've seen a couple of gigs go on, but I'm not sure how keen I am to really move into that world. Part of me is almost thinking I'll ride this out and creatively work on recording and writing and spend this time with the family before everything kicks off again, hopefully early 2021.
Yeah, especially with such a youngster at home. I mean, you're not going to get those early years back. So
exactly, yeah. When he was first born, I was playing loads. I was still out there trying to get things going, and my poor wife, I was out playing probably 3 nights a week, and he was 6 months old, and it's been quite nice to put the brakes on for a little bit, spend some time at home, and I think by the time he's already sleeping through the night now, so it's much easier for me as a dad and a musician to be able to kind of put him to bed and then grab my guitar and leave the house, and when he wakes up in the morning I'll still be there again. So I think from a personal perspective, COVID's almost kind of put an almost timely pause button on the gigging scenario, and it might mean that when I release more new music and hopefully get some tours going for next year, that it'll be easier to get out of the house rather than feeling guilty for not putting in as much work as my poor wife.
So the one burning question I've had on my mind since we started this recording, you say you work at a brewery. What are you brewing over there?
Yeah, man. So yeah, it's been great. I mean, there's been numerous occasions where I've almost gone full-time musician, and then things like COVID happen, and you go, oh, thank the Lord I didn't. So yeah, I work for a brewery, and it's a great job where I can I can get out day by day, and it's pretty flexible for doing things like this, for example. And as long as I'm out there putting beer in bars, and funnily enough, it works out quite well with the music, of course.
What's popular over there? Over here, it's IPAs.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you guys like big beers too, right? So the brewery I work for, they also own New Belgium, which is a craft brewery in the States. And so New Belgium. So Flat Tire and Voodoo Ranger, those beers that you guys have got. So we're owned by the same people. So we're actually launching New Belgium and Voodoo Ranger and those products over here in November. Cool. Yeah, it is cool. Yeah. So, but one funny thing that we've noticed is that we've got to lower the percentage of the beer that you guys have over there for here, because the taste buds generally over here, it's kind of like around 4 to 5%. That's what people want to drink.
Really?
In the craft beer world in the States, you're really into your 6-7%ers, right?
Or 8 or 9.
Gee whiz, my God, it's almost a bottle of wine.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, if you had our president, you want to drink too.
Oh, yeah, I hear you, brother.
Yeah.
I hear you. I mean, 8 or 9%, we call that a dipper, a double IPA, But, So we've got the fashion over here, which we call a session IPA, which is a European term for sessionable IPAs. So pretty much everything that is 4.5% or below, and lagers massively. IPAs massively, but also lagers, because I think of our European heritage, the Pilsner and the lager, and the
I've
Helles.
I've seen a huge resurgence in like Pilsners and lagers over here. Whether the IPAs are kind of running their course or not, but there's definitely, a year, 2 years ago, that's all people wanted was IPAs. Now they're, like, oh, give me a Hefeweizen or, something lighter.
Sure.
And seltzers.
Yeah, I think
seltzers
are
huge
right now. I don't know if seltzers are big, right? And we're also really enjoying sours and, like a Goes or a kettle sour. No, it's amazing. I think for me, it's been an eye-opener and a world that I really enjoy. I actually play music in a lot of breweries. There's some really good gigs that the band and I get, and they'll be in these craft breweries, and they've got these warehouses, and it's like maybe 100, 200 capacity. They get a PA in, and they sell tickets, and they can be some of the best shows, and then they're not in typical music venues.
Yeah, we work a ton with breweries. Back in January, we hosted a concert at a local brewery. We do beer mug paintings, so we bring all the supplies and basically sell mugs, and people paint and decorate their own mugs, and it's the most fun. You work really hard and get everyone set up, and then you wander around with a beer and be like, hey, that's cool, maybe you should give that a second coat, and you just have some beers and hang out, and it's such a great community.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it kind of seems to go hand in hand with music, and I can't really ask for a better evening than having a few pints of good craft beer and listening to some good tunes or playing some tunes. It's I think that's some of the changes that have been really positive over the last few years in sort of the high street in the UK, and independent businesses and breweries, and whether there be a food trader there and you make an event of it. It's it goes hand in hand with good independent record labels and artists. It's been really fun to sort of delve into this world here in London. That's awesome. I'm going to have to come over and check out some of the breweries over there. Yeah, please do, man. Please do. As we'd say, as my Mexican wife would say, she would say, my house is your house, mi casa su casa. Oh, yeah. Anytime you want to come over, brother, we've got a place for you. Oh, awesome. This has been a phenomenal podcast. I've had so much fun. Yeah, likewise. Just remind our listeners where they can go to check out your music, and the single was already released, correct? Single's been released. Yeah, single is out now. It's called "Sign It From Me." It's on Spiritual Records, so you can listen to that now on Apple or Deezer or Spotify. Also, my name William Poyer, Poyer. So I've got a bunch of videos on YouTube, and you can check it all out online: Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever. It'd be great. Have a listen, and hopefully we'll be over in the States before too long. Oh, if you come Boston area, let me know. That'd be fantastic. Oh, yeah, that'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. We'll go listen to some good stand-up, and then we'll get a gig sorted too. Yeah, Plymouth, my hometown here, has 4 breweries in it, and I'm sure we'll keep ourselves occupied. They're pretty easy to find. But it's been a pleasure, man. I want to say thanks again for taking the time to talk to us, and we'll see our listeners again next Monday. Yeah, thanks very much. Have a great weekend, and thanks for listening, folks. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, except for Instagram, we're at Inebri-art6. You can email us with your questions, complaints, and whatnot at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And if you're looking for more podcasts, you can check out the other podcasts on our network, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror, and, of course, Bar Talk, Old Colony, and Inebri-art Podcast, the original. So check those out and subscribe and comment so we can reach more people. And thanks for listening.